Welcome to NewsClick. I'm Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, and with me here from Bengaluru is a dear friend of mine. But that's not why he's here. He is arguably one of India's most eminent historians, a historian of contemporary India. And he's a public intellectual, he's a prolific writer and speaker. His columns appear in The Telegraph, Hindustan Times, Amar Ujala. He's authored or edited 25 books, including 7 books on cricket. And of course, he's a trenchant critic of not just the present regime, but also the Indian National Congress. Thank you so much, Ram, for giving us your time. And let me start. And let me start with your latest tweet, where you have described PM Cares as a self-aggrandizing name. Why could people not donate to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund? And you have said it is a colossal national tragedy that even this tragedy is being misused to enhance a personality cult. And you have retweeted, I should say, an article written by an advocate, Advocate Manoj, where he's wondered, what were the compelling reasons to set up another public charitable trust? And he's even gone to the extent of wondering why cronies like, and he's called them Akshay Canada Kumar and Jay BCCI Shah and Vijay Paytm, why are they sort of bending over to contribute money to this, to PM Cares? And finally, it's really cutting. The lawyer has said, did the sub-registrar visit the Prime Minister's residence, or did the Prime Minister travel to the sub-registrar's office? Why did you retweet this, and why do you think this, just because a new trust has been set up, a new organization has been set up, it should be self-aggrandizing and is being used to enhance a personality cult?
First of all, it is a colossal national tragedy, and I'm sure in the course of this conversation, we'll discuss the different dimensions of the tragedy: the health tragedy, the medical tragedy, economic tragedy, the psychological tragedy, the moral tragedy, and so on. So here's a great moral tragedy that the country faces. The country has faced previous tragedies in the past. It has faced earthquakes, cyclones, communal violence, destitution, and for that there is already not just a Prime Minister's relief fund. Every chief minister has a relief fund. So if I'm in Bengaluru, I'm concerned about migrant workers in Karnataka, I can donate to the Karnataka Chief Minister's Relief Fund. So the procedure to donate exists. There was absolutely no reason to start a new fund. Secondly, the name is very telling because it's PM Cares. Only the PM cares. And of course, now there's going to be branding with the PM's face, and one does not. So I think it is, on purely on aesthetic grounds, is rather vulgar. It's not needed. There already is a procedure to get donations. It's been given this very personalizing, self-aggrandizing name. I'm sure the PM's photograph will be part of it. And the procedure by which the fund, the new trust was registered, as the lawyer points out, is very murky. Advocate Manoj, I tweeted yesterday, today he has a very long and very informative piece in The Wire, which went up about 2 hours ago, which raises even more questions about the dubious nature of this exercise and how people were complicit. Apparently, the PM tweeted at 4:51 PM. By 5:18, the IAS Association had already donated. 3 minutes later, Akshay Kumar had already donated. Now, all these industrialists who came later want to curry favor with the Prime Minister directly, and one does not know why. Are they scared? Are they nervous? Do they expect something? But the two things. One is, there's absolutely no need for such a fund. A fund exists. Secondly, if you want a new fund, call it the COVID fund, the healthcare fund. Why give it such a tendentious, personalizing, self-aggrandizing name? Only the Prime Minister cares. सिर्फ प्रधानमंत्री आपका ध्यान रखता है, it's the kind of message that is going, because everything by this prime minister is personalized. So I found it quite wrong. I mean, and many people have I think endorsed what I felt. So I wish that a tragedy like this, which is many dimensions, I'm sure we'll discuss it. You've been following it closely as an economist and as an observer of how the Indian economy is already in a slump and is going to be hit much more by this. As a reporter, over the years, you've covered many, difficult, problematic situations our fellow Indians have had. So it just seemed wrong, unnecessary, immoral, and even, dare I say it, vulgar.
Ram, what has unfolded in the last few days before us is a tragedy of unparalleled proportions. I personally went to the Anand Vihar bus depot on Sunday, and I saw with my own eyes the hundreds of thousands of people who were sitting on the ground. The previous evening and the evening before that, there was panic. I mean, look, you announce a lockdown of the country for 3 weeks, and people have what? You've given 3.5 hours notice. The Prime Minister's speech ends at 8:30 p.m. and you're saying from midnight everything is locked down. And after that, you've seen what has happened. You've seen the kind of panic and the kind of the migration that has taken place, and they are all poor. They are migrant labor. There are people without regular jobs. There are people who are so scared that they're willing to walk literally hundreds and hundreds of kilometers to be with their families. And they're completely unconvinced that the government will take care of them, will give them food, will give them shelter. And in between all, we see this nasty political slugging match taking place among the political leadership, between the representatives of the Aam Aadmi Party-led government of Delhi and the Uttar Pradesh government led by Yogi Adityanath. And of course, there is the union government headed by Prime Minister Modi. And interestingly, the Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, seems to be missing in action, so to say. Your comments?
Well, well, first or the last, I'm not sure whether he's entirely missing in action, because the recent tendentious tweets of the BJP IT cell may have his signature over them. So that's, which is a side, maybe a diversionary issue. But, on the question of the lockdown, South Africa, whose economy depends on migrant workers, both from the countryside into the cities and from neighboring countries like Zimbabwe, Zambia, and so on, had the wisdom to give them 3 days notice. South Africa announced a lockdown 3 days said it will come into operation 72 hours from now. Now, when I was watching the Prime Minister's speech on the day of the lockdown, I was mystified. I'm not an expert on migrant labor, but as soon as he started, I told my family members, there must be 1 million migrant workers in Mumbai itself. Unka kya hoga? Now, it's rather ironic for a person who arose from such humble origins. I mean, the Prime Minister, unlike someone like me, or unlike someone like you, has known destitution and poverty growing up. But he doesn't empathize with the poor and the vulnerable. His entire focus was on the middle class. He gave people of the middle class like you and me 3 days notice during the while announcing the Janta curfew. He said, you have 3 days to get your thalis to bang. And yet, migrant workers were given 4 hours. I mean, it was mystifying. Either, he doesn't consult people, either it's only the dramatic impact as the demonetization, what will be the most important thing. And, there's some very distressing things about how the government cheerleaders have treated this. The Prime Minister gave his speech announcing a three-week lockdown. The next day, the CEO of Prasar Bharati, technically an independent government broadcaster, boasted on Twitter, more people have watched the Prime Minister's speech than the IPL final. This is really, a Nero fiddling while Rome is burning. And people are scared, they're panicked, they don't know where to go. And then you have punitive measures, close the state borders, you send intimidatory messages to state governments. So you pass the buck out to state governments, but they have to deal with these people. They have to house them, give them shelter, allow them to travel. why couldn't you arrange buses, transportation in a targeted way and give these millions and millions of migrant workers 72 hours to go back? Now, one of the long-term consequences of this terrible act, ill-thought, terrible act that has led to so much panic and suffering, is that our economy depends on movement and migration. Now people will be scared to move because they won't know. You need free movement of people to sustain an economy. And now migrants will be scared to move from city to city, the countryside to the town. So I'm mystified as to how someone like Narendra Modi, who grew up in a kind of relatively underprivileged background, who grew up in small town Gujarat, who knows that the economy of Gujarat depends on migration. From Ahmedabad, people were walking back to Dungarpur in Rajasthan. That was reported within a few hours of the lockdown. So it is really absolutely mystifying.
Ram, you mentioned demonetization, which happened in 2016 in November. Now, it seems it did not affect the Prime Minister's popularity. Yes, people went through hardships. The underprivileged went through terrible times. But a few months later, when Uttar Pradesh went to the elections, the Bharatiya Janata Party came back, with a sweeping majority. So these so-called difficult decisions, even if the Prime Minister's critics describe them as arbitrary, these do not seem to have even made a marginal dent on his popularity. Therefore, do you think that could be a reason he felt emboldened to take what he described as a very difficult step? And you must remember on Sunday he apologized, and at the same time he's praising the doctors and the nurses, even if he mentioned not a single word about the migrant workers who were walking. You could have argued that if the Prime Minister had said, even in that speech that he made, that we are going to make food, we are going to make food available to you, we're going to tell the state government that you're going to get free food. 36 hours later, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced a slew of measures. She says nobody's going to go hungry. Why couldn't the Prime Minister announce all these measures in advance? Are you trying to tell me he couldn't have anticipated what happened? And if he did in fact announce all these things, could he have not perhaps checked some of that migration? Could he not perhaps have, assuaged, people who were so scared? And at the end of the day, don't you think it might have even enhanced his popularity further?
Possibly. Now, first of all, on the question of his electability, it's indeed possible that this will help him electorally, which is a commentary on the state of the opposition, more than anything else. But the larger issue is that there is now a national tragedy. Everyone agrees demonetization set back our economy seriously. Now, this has plunged our economy further in crisis and recession. I would now urge the Prime Minister to look forward and consult. The mistakes he's made in the past are because he is too proud, too insecure, either too nervous to consult capable people. Now we have a crisis. We have economists like Jean Drèze, Ritika Khera, Jyoti Ghosh, who understand the problems of working people and migrant laborers much more than anyone in North Block. Get them on board. Take their advice. At a time of great national crisis, to forget petty partisan politics, to reach out to the best advisors, regardless of party affiliation. By the way, there are some outstanding health secretaries, recently retired, who were in charge when H1N1 happened. They saw it off. Who were instrumental working with the doctors and the medical fraternity in eradicating polio from India, in controlling AIDS in India. These are really capable people who are much more capable than the people in government. But Mr. Modi will not consult them. Even compared to the last Modi government, Paranjoy, Arun Jaitley has gone, Sushma Swaraj has gone, Manohar Parrikar has gone. Even capable people within their ranks they don't have. They need expertise from outside to help rebuild this country, and they must not stand on pride.
Okay. Ram, we have begun the second decade of the new millennium in a manner in which a whole lot of things have happened which were at one level completely unanticipated. How would you compare what is happening today, what is happening now before our eyes, as a historian, to what happened in the 40s? The Great Bengal Famine, the Partition of India, which is arguably one of the largest forced migrations in the history of humankind, and certainly in the 20th century. Is the situation comparable, or am I being just alarmist?
No, I don't think you're being alarmist. Now, if you consider, Paranjoy, we were both born in the 50s. So we were born too late to see the Bengal famine, the Second World War, partition. But we saw the famines of the 60s, the defeat by China, which was a national crisis. We saw the emergency, which is a national crisis. We saw the Babri Masjid demolition, which is a national crisis. I think this is much worse than any crisis you and I have seen in our lifetime. Is it as bad as partition? I'm not sure, but it's on that scale because it is a health crisis. Many people are going to die. It's a medical crisis because we don't have infrastructure. It is an economic crisis. Many industries are already defunct, are dead, like airline and tourism. Agriculture and manufacturing are grievously affected. It's a humanitarian crisis. You just have to look at the migrant workers. It's a psychological crisis, and I'm sure this will lead to many more cases of depression and mental health, and we do not have enough mental health professionals to tackle that. So it's a multiple, it's also international relations crisis because the trust between China and America, us and China has broken down. So multilateralism is also much more difficult in the current context. Maybe partition was like this. My mother is in her 90s. She lived through partition and the World War. She says, you are seeing what I saw there. So I think that's the scale. And it requires a comparable, all-party, constructive, collaborative, non-personality based response. That's what it requires.
As you say, you said we've been through many crises. You've talked about us having already entered the fourth crisis. What was could you define a little bit more with greater clarity? What is the fourth crisis, and has that crisis deepened further because of what has happened in recent weeks?
So we have entered what I believe was the fourth crisis before Corona. I wrote an article which you're referring to in January, before Corona really hit India. And the manifestation...
The 26th of January.
Declining economy, Hindu-Muslim polarization, majoritarianism, the sense that the ruling party wants Muslims and Christians to be second-class citizens. Thirdly, decline of institutions. So, whether it be our civil service, our police, our tax authorities, our judiciary, our army, our RBI, our election commission, frankly, anyone objectively not as robust as they were. And fourthly, the environmental crisis, air pollution, devastation of our rivers, toxic waste in our soil, depletion of groundwater aquifers. So we already had multiple economic, social, political, and environmental crises before COVID, and COVID intensified them. And I think that's why it's very, very important that we get our best heads together. Because at a time like this, you need trust, you need understanding. You don't need demonizing of our minorities, which is what the ruling party is doing.
Your last comments. Where do we go from here? What do you think is likely to happen? Do you think Narendra Modi, our Prime Minister, would be listening to your advice that we'll be taking on board his critics, experts from different walks of life, consulting them, discussing with them how to overcome this crisis, how to try and improve the situation, how to ensure that livelihoods are not destroyed further, that the gap between the rich and the poor doesn't widen, and at the end of the day, it's in everybody's interest, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi's, to have, to be able to overcome this crisis as rapidly as possible with the least amount of damage. So, do you seriously think he's going to listen to the kind of advice that somebody like you is giving?
Let me, I don't know about him, but to the viewers of this program, to ordinary Indians, regardless of party affiliation, personality cults are bad for a country. India is too large, too diverse, too complex to be run successfully by one man, however intelligent and energetic and self-sacrificing he is. You can have a Lee Kuan Yew for Singapore, make it a model state. You cannot have a Lee Kuan Yew in India centralizing all the powers in himself and leave behind a healthy or prosperous society. So we must not, I'll end with one last quote, Paranjoy. This is from Ambedkar. In his last speech to the Constituent Assembly, he said, Bhakti in religion is a route to the salvation of the soul. But Bhakti in politics is a route to eventual dictatorship. He warned his fellow Indians, do not lay down your liberties at the feet of a single man, however great that man was. You and I remember when Indians laid down their liberties at the feet of Indira Gandhi, what that got us. So it's very, very important, a warning to all our fellow Indians. Maybe Mr. Modi will course correct. All personality cults end in disaster.
Thank you so much, Ram, for giving us your time. I know we could have continued this discussion. I thank all our viewers and keep watching NewsClick.